Good afternoon. Welcome to Bermuda's News and Views. I'm your host, Don Burgess. And with us today, we are privileged to have Mischa Fubler, candidate for Smithhouse by-election for the PLP. Welcome, sir.
Hi, Don. It's good to see you again. How you doing today?
I'm doing quite well, thank you.
Nice.
Thank you for taking some of your valuable time today to be with us and help inform the viewers, make them more informed for the election coming up next week, Thursday. Very quickly, can you give us a 1-minute bio of who you are?
Sure, 1-minute bio. So I'm Mischa Fubler. Grew up here, attended public school. I have an undergraduate degree in urban studies, which is focused on kind of city planning and sociology, how cities develop over time and how people interact with the city and each other. And my master's degree is in information systems, which focuses on both kind of the technical aspects of computer science as well as IT project management. I returned home in 2017 after leaving in 2002 for education and experience. And I currently work in reinsurance in the kind of applications and management information space.
All right,
Also, I'm one of the founding members of Social Justice Bermuda, and I currently sit on the board of the Stick organization.
I think that was when I met you. The first time was in the Arboretum, and you guys were getting ready to march down to the U.S. consulate for those protests. But could not be. But I think that's correct. So, what are some of the issues you've heard from the constituents of Smithhouse?
I mean, there's definitely some refrains, things that many people have mentioned, like the roads and cost of living, specifically kind of the walkability of the neighborhood. But everyone is an individual, so I'm also hearing about education and issues affecting senior citizens, although I guess those also kind of tie back into the cost of living. Also, I've been kind of sharing my ideas. I had a few proposals for what I think we could do in the neighborhood, and getting a farmer's market going at Spill Pond seems to be pretty popular so far with the folks I've spoken to.
Oh, that sounds like it'd be pretty popular with farmer's market. Anything else that you had for an idea for Smithhouse?
Yeah, I'd really like to see us collaborate with the industrial businesses in the area on Lolly's Well there. There's been, roads on the national scale, but also in Smithhouse, there's several businesses with heavy machinery using the roads, Harrington Sound and Lolly's Well specifically, that could do with some assistance. And specifically, I'd like to see collaboration and some kind of partnership to make it more affordable for the residents to pave their private estate roads, as that's not something typically covered by the government these days.
Okay. Now, we've heard a lot about that you're a non-traditionalist in the terms of the PLP base and core values. What are some of your positions that you take a slightly different tack than the base does?
Okay, well, I want to start with, it's a big tent. I feel like I'm not alone in some of the ideals I carry in the PLP. Some of those members might not be the loudest or most out front, but they're there as well. I guess if you had to pick kind of a political ideology, mine probably more closely aligns with socialism, although many of the programs and policies we see coming out of the current government speak to that, and especially the social safety net. But outside of that, I'm also, pro LGBTQ rights. I've been a volunteer attendee of the Pride Parade since its inception. And I also think that the current political system kind of encourages the kind of divisiveness. It doesn't really encourage collaboration, as we've seen historically. Often the people are more concerned with scoring political points or just pointing out failures as opposed to contributing solutions that are pragmatic and benefit the majority.
Now, you mentioned LGBTQ rights. How do you see those views slowly changing in the PLP?
Well, I mean, I've said it internally and I'll say it externally as well. There are many members of that community that are also members of the PLP. And I think it's unfortunate that their voices have not been louder in the discourse. And I intend to continue advocating on their behalf.
Right. Do you think there's less stigma now? We've gone through this process, with the voices being heard a little bit more over the last few years.
Sure, yeah. I mean, we've had the Pride Parade 3 instances over, since 2020. So, yeah, I'd say yes. I don't know. It's difficult for me to say, like my typical social circle isn't really vocally anti-LGBTQ. So from what I'm hearing, this is the norm. I have heard significant excitement and enthusiasm from some of my friends who were even considering returning home now off the back of the most recent Pride events.
Okay. Now, I'm going to paraphrase you here. I mean, because you've said in the past something akin to like the PLP know what they're getting when they chose you as a candidate for Smithhouse. If elected, how hard will you stick to your values when there might be some pushback from the more traditionalist-based values?
Well, I tell you what, Don, it's a significant sacrifice for myself and my family to put myself forward in this political space. I'm not making that to kind of conform to whatever the established PLP leadership wants to have happen. You can see it in the interview we did at the nomination day there at St. Patrick's Church. My views on the Westminster system differ somewhat from the party, and I won't diminish what they have to say. Look, this is the party stance, this is my stance, and I intend to advocate for what my beliefs are within the party.
Yeah. And how would you change from the Westminster system?
I'd like to see, at the very least, a change in how we do the voting. Right now, first past the post makes many kind of apprehensive to take a chance on new politicians. In some other interviews I've done, they asked why the PLP. And, when I looked at running independently, there's the stats, right? You're averaging maybe 5-ish% if you're lucky of the vote running independent. Even my uncle Gilbert Darrell, he ran as an independent originally in Smiths and won, but ultimately joined the PLP so that he could have more impact in the legislature. And I think that I'm going to continue. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there. But the question one more time.
Yeah. So the Westminster system, what changes would you make? And you mentioned
right. So because of
this
with the independents, and I'd like to see maybe ranked voting as an example. There's several options for shifting from first past the post, which is as soon as you have simple majority, you're now the government. That doesn't really encourage people taking chances on new political entrants. Whereas with ranked voting, you can, this is my number one choice, but if they're unsuccessful, go with kind of my fallback. And I feel we'd see much more of a shift in the way people are voting as opposed to right now. Anecdotally, I hear people typically vote party over person, which is something I'm hoping to show the electorate is willing to reconsider in this election.
Yeah, I think there's been several incidents in the United States where some states have first past the post, but some are doing ranked voting, where candidates who were second or third, once the other candidates were dropped out from it, they ended up winning their seat that they were running for.
Yeah,
because more people coalesced around them as their top choice rather than the person who may have been leading at the start.
Yeah, exactly. From public sentiment, there are many who are unhappy with the current state, and so I think we should entertain the idea of change.
All right. Now we've talked about some of your differences from the PLP, but what makes you a different or better candidate than the OBA's Ben Smith?
So I've been trying to avoid direct comparison between myself and Ben Smith. I'm sure he's a great guy. Coaching is an essential skill at this kind of senior leadership level. I will say that I possess a different skill set from what Ben has, specifically in the kind of urban planning and IT management space as examples, places where we're looking to kind of push change in the legislature. also, I mean, I don't know him personally, but I imagine I'm a little more left than he is as far as political ideology, at least as far as what I've heard of him in the House when I tune in and the public statements that have been made. One other thing, I'd like to bring a shift in the change the culture in the government wherein, someone's made a mistake with like the anti-doping thing and immediately calling for resignation. I don't think that style of like, you made a mistake, you're punished now, is the best approach to get the best out of our teams that are doing the work. I think focusing more on solutions for avoiding the same problem happening again, I could like, that's a better approach, and that's kind of my style in my own team leadership. Working in IT, it's often, people will attempt to avoid blame or won't take adequate risk to get the benefit from that change if they're mostly afraid about someone calling for their position as soon as the ball is dropped.
Yeah, and we've seen that this last week or so with the cyber attack on Bermuda, and it's the first time that we've had something of this manner. What do you
That's
think?
been public. I imagine there's a consistent risk, right, in this IT infosec space. It's interesting. I've seen public sentiment around how can we be a tech hub if we've had the government compromised. But I went to check. I was curious. Simple searches. San Francisco's BART police, as an example, had a significant breach in January and were locked up for some time. And San Francisco still has the reputation of being a tech hub, as an example. Like several other large tech organizations like Samsung, as an example. Like it's a consistent game of cat and mouse. As you continue to implement stronger information security posture, the bad actors will adapt so that they continue to be successful.
Now, what do you think are the lessons we can learn from this attack?
Well, I need to be briefed more on the details before I can kind of speak to that specifically. But when I heard this was happening, I immediately started to reach out to people I'm, friends and acquaintances within the government to check. All right, so like, are we getting regular infosec training? And we are. They're getting things quarterly they're required to do. What kind of network architecture have we implemented in the government? And are there things like active monitoring in place across that network? There's tools available that are leveraging AI to say, well, this is what typical traffic looks like, and here's something that's unusual from that. Make sure that the network admins are looking into that. We saw in what's been shared the timeline Wednesday late evening, and we didn't really notice things were out of whack until early Thursday morning, and those kinds of things can, I wouldn't say avoided, but mitigated with leveraging that type of technology. And I need to be closer to the details to know if that's something we're currently doing.
Okay. Now, for the by-election next week, are there gradients of success for you, or is it win and nothing else?
I'm going for the win, right? I don't want to spend all this time putting myself out there and catching the ire of the folks on the Royal Gazette comments, as an example, to not. But I think you guys have a slide prepared with some of the stats. I'm also looking at historical performance. For the longest, Cole Simons enjoyed somewhere on the order of 75% of the vote in Smithhouse. Kudos to Owen Darrell, who in 2020 knocked about 9 points off of that lead. I'm looking to build on that. I think I'll be happy with even it being contentious, closely, but obviously the goal is to win. And reassuringly, I've on the doorstep, as well as people reaching out to me directly, have said things along the lines of, well, we've typically voted for the OBA or the UBP, but we want you to know you have our support in the election.
Do you think like maybe people are reacting to you in a favorable way because you're not coming across as a traditional PLP candidate?
I hope so. I hope folks are open to change. I think if you're unsure of kind of what my political ideals are, or if I'm an actual progressive, you just need to look to the things I've done since returning. And it's out there. Like I said, we had an interview a couple years ago now where we were speaking about cannabis reform, or at least we touched on that. And like, my involvement in that team is specifically from the social justice standpoint of like, once you have a criminal record that involves cannabis possession, you have significantly reduced access to education and experience in the US and Canada, just as a simple example. And then also I had input into the platform that SJB put out. I believe wholeheartedly in the things we put forward as what we would like to see happen in the legislature. And I think some of those items were actually implemented already. So I think that's, successful advocating, and I intend to bring that ethos to the legislature as a member of the PLP.
Okay. Now we're at the end of the interview, but there's probably lots of things that I haven't asked you that you want to speak about. Is there anything in particular that you want to stress to the people out there?
Sure. I want to thank the team that's been here out supporting me in the canvassing days, and the coordination that's required to make this happen. I want to thank my wife for being on board with me doing this. Is a significant absence at home as a result of being out there weekends and a few evenings a week canvassing. I will say to the people of Smithhouse, if you're unsure and you want to have a chat, please reach out. I think the team sent a mailer out this week that should have my email, which is mischa.fubler@plp.pm, or my personal cell phone number. Give me a call or shoot me an email. I'm happy to chat. I think, what we've seen, people are ready for a change, and I think I represent that.
Okay. We want to thank you very much, Mr. Fubler, for being with us today, and appreciate your time.
Yeah. Thanks, Don. It's good. Always great time. I like what Bermuda does. Keep it up. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
And also kudos to the teachers. You back in the classroom this year, I'm assuming?
Yes. Well, I'm finishing up my master's in educational technology. So.
Oh, nice.
Right. Well, again, we want to thank Mr. Fubler. We had Mr. Smith on earlier, and on behalf of Burn News, we want to thank everyone that's tuned in today. And as always, have a beautiful afternoon.